How does your faith reflect the wealth that you can build and sustain in this life?
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. Today we're going to talk about how wealth is sustained. And usually when we think of wealth, we think of high net worth individuals or maybe families or corporations. And this is where wealth is often accumulated or administered. But what goes into making that wealth sustainable wherever it is accumulated or administered?
That's a really important question. And before we get really rolling today, we want to remind everybody that may be listening for the first time or just those who listen on a regular basis. When we talk about wealth here at Life Benefits, we're not talking exclusively about money or the accumulation of money. In fact, our definition of true wealth is what's left after all your money is gone or all your material possessions, because wealth encompasses much more than just the material. It has to do with a spiritual aspect as well, and that part is often overlooked in a society where we're supposed to be climbing not only the financial ladder, but the social ladder and the emotional ladder and the prestige ladder. And those things don't necessarily bring the wealth to your soul.
And yeah, not any more than climbing the money ladder. Brings wealth.
Money can't buy you love, the Beatles used to sing, and that's absolutely true.
Yeah, so people are climbing all of these ladders today, but what do they really have at the end of the day when they stop along the way to take an evaluation? They're clinging to a ladder that's often in a very precarious position.
And so what we believe here at Life Benefits is in something called the Life Benefits formula, which if we broke it down to kind of a mathematical equation, it would be hard work plus mutual respect plus education times your faith will build the sustainable wealth you're looking at. And today we're going to focus more on the faith aspect of that equation, and as we've talked about the hard work and the mutual respect and education. So the faith aspect of that comes from Jeremiah chapter 32, where Jeremiah the prophet was approached by his cousin to purchase a piece of property in Israel, where Jeremiah had already been prophesying that Israel was going to be wiped out and it was not going to be any longer. And yet, just in that chapter, it talks about how God comes to Jeremiah and lets him know that there will be property bought and sold in Israel again under the jurisdiction of Israel and not some foreign dominion.
Yeah, the Babylonians were coming to take over. And this was a huge, catastrophic event for the people living in the land of Israel at that time. And to go out and buy a piece of land says a lot about the faith that Jeremiah had to place in the future.
Yes, and he had to take action to do that. It wasn't just some passive, I believe. It was, no, I'm going to go put my money on it, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, so did that piece of land ever turn out profitable for Jeremiah? That part we don't know.
Well, not for Jeremiah, because he passed long before Israel came back into existence as an independent country. But it came back for his descendants. And that's why Solomon says that a righteous man leaves an inheritance even to his children's children. And so that piece of property that was deeded in Jeremiah's name was something then that his descendants, once they came back to Judah and were able to reclaim their land, that piece of property in the tribe of Benjamin went to Jeremiah's descendants.
Okay. Interesting.
So, we're always talking, about participating whole life insurance, and what does that have to do with all of this?
Well, it helps with the monetary portion of a legacy in the fact that it multiplies it and it multiplies it relatively quickly, and it can help us to continue a sustainable legacy that includes money uh, to multiple generations. That's where the value comes in.
It does. And the other thing is it's a contract, just like recording a deed is a contract. A contract is between two people agreeing on something or two legal entities. Recording a deed, you record it with the state. The state then guarantees that that property stays in the framework of what that deed was constructed like. In a life insurance policy, there's a contract between the policyholder and the insurance company that guarantees there will be a death benefit and there will be cash value that develops in that policy. And so using whole life insurance like we do is an exercise of faith in the future of what you believe the future is going to be. So by purchasing a policy, you believe that the insurance company can contractually hold up their end of the contract.
Sure. And so that contract comes along with some guarantees, which is one of the reasons that we're a fan of using life insurance, is because no other financial instrument has that level of guaranteed growth, and just even guaranteeing the fact that your money will be there.
Yes.
That's not found with a lot of other financial vehicles. So you do get a level of security with this type of life insurance, but there's also that element of faith in believing the insurance company is going to be able to stand up to their side of the contract and provide a death benefit at
That's
some point
correct.
in the future. And that's where the legacy part comes in.
And there's different kinds of contracts, even in whole life insurance. Not all whole life insurance is the same. Every whole life insurance policy can be designed very unique around your needs, and then that contract becomes binding between you and the insurance company. So let's talk about a couple of those type of different contracts. And a contract, by its very nature, is a statement of faith in that you believe that something is going to transpire in the future. So the first contract that we can talk about, which we don't talk about very frequently, is a single premium contract.
Okay.
A single premium life insurance contract where you just pay one time and never pay another dime into the policy.
So what does that look like for, say, a 45-year-old that's in average health? If they put down, say, $100,000 for a single premium policy, how much is that going to give them death benefit and cash value wise?
Well, cash value wise, there always is a cost to the death benefit. So there's not going to be 100% of what you put down immediately.
Sure.
But if you were to die immediately after buying a single premium policy, you would multiply, as a 45-year-old male, you'd multiply what you had just paid by 3.47 times.
Okay.
So this is a legacy policy.
Sure.
This is money that you really don't need to live on currently. This is a way to bump up the amount that you've been able to build in your lifetime and multiply it for the people that are going to follow you.
Okay. So putting down 100,000, you basically have 347,000 of death benefit.
That's correct.
Immediately.
And that would be passing tax-free to the beneficiary of your choice.
Okay. Great.
But that's not the only thing. We're not hoping this person dies at 45, right?
No. And in fact, they probably won't. If they're in average health, most of us are going to live well beyond 45.
And so by the time this fellow's 67, his single premium policy, the cash values in it, will have more than doubled by the time he's 67. Now, that's money he can use in his lifetime. So now he could access half of that money and get all the money back he paid for this and still leave a huge legacy to the people that he wants to benefit.
Mm-hmm. Now, that brings up something else, though. If in a single premium policy, is there going to be any tax consequences if he wants to use that money?
Well, after the age of 59 and a half, there would be tax on the growth, just as ordinary income tax. but this is still a great way to leave a legacy.
Yeah, if you're just looking at it for the legacy, absolutely, it's definitely multiplying it.
And so, if this person continues to live and survive by 80, he's tripled the cash values. That's not bad.
Yeah.
And of course, the death benefit is going to be growing at the same time, which had already increased by 3.47 times from the very beginning.
Okay.
So something like this is used for people that understand wealth as a way to leave more money than what they've been able to accumulate
Okay.
in a tax-free way, so that it's not being eroded by the boundaries that Scripture tells us we're not to move, but which have been moved in our society.
Mm-hmm. So this type of policy, a single premium, would be for somebody who wants to multiply the legacy and isn't too concerned about accessing the money along the way. They could get to it if they needed it.
Right.
But they might have to pay some taxes just because of the way this policy is designed.
Yes.
It falls under different tax regulations. But if somebody does want to be able to use the cash values along the way a little bit more frequently, have that option, and so they still want to leave a legacy too, what would be a better way to go?
Well, there's different kinds of policies, and perhaps maybe a 10-pay policy
Okay.
or a 20-pay. Where you pay the premiums just for a certain number of years, and then you stop paying the policy. And these are used by people who often have a chunk of money that they would like to put into life insurance so that they can multiply it for the next generation, but they're not really sure that they might not need it in their own lifetime as well.
Okay.
And so by taking a lump sum and buying a 10-pay policy, you can earn interest on the lump sum, and every year part of that lump sum go to pay your premium for 10 years. And after that point, you will end up having more money than what you paid for it. So the policy has not cost you anything really at that point, if you were to surrender it.
Okay.
And if you don't surrender it, then it's going to continue to grow with the guarantee that all whole life has, and that is that your cash value and your death benefit will equal each other at the time of maturity. So as you progress, there's going to be money that you're able to access on. Now, this policy, unlike the single premium, if you need to access the money, there is no tax consequences if you borrow it. It's only if you surrender it, then there would be tax on any gain that you experienced over the cost basis.
And there is definitely gain in here, because by age 67 here, surrender values are 1.5 times, more than that, actually, than all the premiums that were paid over that time.
That's correct. Yeah. So this is a great way to take care of money that comes to you that you may need, but you're not really sure, but you don't want to lock it up in a place where you're going to get some extra taxes on it.
And you want to still build a legacy.
And you still want the legacy. Yeah.
Now, the cash values are going to grow even beyond that 1.5 times.
Oh, yes.
As well. So by age 80, then they're going to have grown almost 2.5 times than all the premiums paid. So this is something that keeps getting better. You don't have to worry about getting this policy and dying before the death benefit runs out like you do with a term insurance policy. This is something that's going to be around, and it'll just be there. When you do pass, it'll be there to provide the legacy.
And if you'll notice that this is the same 45-year-old example where we're using in the single premium, and at age 80 in the single premium policy, the cash values were 3 times what had been paid.
Okay.
So the growth is not as rapid.
But you can get to it.
But you can access it a little bit easier without taxes. So it's still every policy is with a different purpose here. So another type of policy which would be to design one that would allow you to put in extra money in future years. Right now, maybe you don't have a lot, but you're expecting more to come, which is really what most people are like, because hopefully in our 30s, we're not making as much money as we're going to make in our 40s and 50s. And that's just a typical average American scenario that we're talking about there. So you can design a policy on the same 45-year-old standard male who's in average health, where they're paying, $10,000 a year for their first 5 years, and then after that they want to bump it up to $12,500 for the
Okay.
next 7 years, and they can do that in certain products. And what happens is that helps a person accumulate more cash value than if they didn't.
Okay.
And without having to be forced, have to go back through underwriting in year 6 to make that happen. And this is a policy that
So $10,000 a year for the first 5 years, and then they bump it up to $12,500 through year 12.
that's correct.
Okay.
And then after that, that type of policy isn't going to hold any more money, because then you would get into a position where it would be taxable just like the single premium.
Okay.
Now, you could continue to do that, just understanding that the growth is going to be like a single premium policy. But there's going to be taxes on it, consequences. But again, it's a great tool for someone who is starting off at a lower number than what they know or fully expecting to be able to do in the future. And the nice thing about this, if they can't afford the extra $2,500 in the last 7 years of this policy, they don't have to put it in either,
Okay.
because the $10,000 is what they agreed to pay.
Yeah. And so that would sustain the policy. Okay.
So what happens with this is the face value in the is something that that grows, the death benefit, and the cash value grows as well. And by age 67, his surrender values are going to be, close to 200,000, and possibly as much as 240,000 with dividends.
Okay.
The nice thing about this policy, when he reaches 80 years old, he will have doubled the money compared to what he's paid for the policy in his surrender values.
Nice.
So again, this is a double rather than a triple, like was what happened in a single premium policy. But again, it's allowed him to have access to that money without having consequences.
Very nice. Now, and the death benefits on each of these, I don't know if they're listed here in this particular example that we have on the screen, but with the that's multiplying it even more than double.
It is.
When he does end up passing.
It is, and it's and of course that's the legacy part of it as well.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about a policy designed primarily for taking a legacy that's been given to you. Maybe you've won the lottery, or maybe you had an inheritance or an insurance settlement. And it's like a lot of people that do that, they realize this isn't really my money. This kind of just fell on me out of heaven. What can I do to make sure I preserve this money, but still manage it and be able to get it to grow?
Sure.
And so in this example, we're going to take that same 45-year-old standard healthy male, and he's going to inherit $1 million from his parents.
Okay.
So now he's got this $1 million, and he feels, I need to do something with this so that I'm able to pass something at least or greater on to my own children, because this is a legacy that we want to keep going. And in doing that, he realizes that his parents had to contribute to that. So he's going to contribute as well.
Okay.
And so he's decided he's going to put $41,000 of his own money into this every year, and to make sure that happens. And so he takes the $1 million and he puts it in an interest-bearing account so that it will pay $79,000 a year from that interest-bearing account added to his 41 over the first 10 years to build a sustainable policy that will protect the $1 million that his parents gave him and add to it significantly.
Okay, so he's using the $100,000 that he inherited to contribute $79,000 a year. Then he's adding another 41 to it, so basically he's ending up with 120.
That's correct.
So 120,000 a year, 79 per year. That's coming from the $1 million that was inherited. Okay.
So in year 1, after he pays that first $120,000, the death benefit in this policy is close to $3 million.
Okay.
And that's over 240 times more than what he paid for the policy in year one.
Okay.
So right off the bat, he's protected the legacy of $1 million, plus he's multiplied what he's paid to it if he died by over 240 times.
Nice.
By year 10, his death benefit has increased by an additional 1.75 times. And in year 11, the surrender value is growing by more than 80% greater than what his $41,000 that he's paying
In that 11th year.
in that 11th year. So now, not only has he protected the legacy that was given to him, he's added to it. And now in year 11, he's starting to reap the rewards of his own contribution to this.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he pays that premium in year 11 of just $41,000, because all the $1 million is gone,
Mm-hmm.
the cash values increase by over 40%, by over 80% of what he paid in premium for the year.
Nice.
And that's going to continue to happen, and it's going to get better. By age 67, that $41,000 being paid is going to multiply 116 times for that year when he's 67 in cash value surrender. So it's going to be that much greater than his premium paid.
Wow. So over all those years, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. By year 80, his dividends could have reached as much as over $1 million. Which
Is that cumulative?
That's cumulative
Okay.
dividends. Mm-hmm. So now, just in dividends alone, he has more than matched the legacy that was left.
Yes.
And his surrender values, his cash values, at this time are going to be around $5 million.
Nice.
Now he can use that
Mm-hmm.
in his lifetime, and if he uses that $5 million, he's still going to leave over $2 million as a legacy, which doubles
Mm-hmm.
what his parents had left him. Or if he doesn't need to use the 4.9 million,
Then has multiplied the legacy multiple times,
Yes.
7 times.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what wealthy people have understood about participating in whole life insurance contracts for centuries. And it's why they tend to keep more of the money they make in the family
Mm-hmm.
than wage earners who go out and think that, I've got to keep enough so that I survive,
Mm-hmm.
but are not thinking on how can I survive and make the next generation better.
Yeah. This brings up an interesting point that Zig Ziglar used to talk about. He said we move from survival mindset to stability, from stability to success, and from success to significance. And many people are fighting day to day when they're working paycheck for paycheck. It's very much of a survival mindset.
It is.
Even when they move to stability, most people don't lose that mindset that they adopted while they were in survival mode. They keep that going into stability, and they always think in terms of scarcity. The people that reach success and stay there long term always want to move on to significance. And that's where this legacy comes in here. Because the wealthy, they think differently. And you addressed that in your book, Winning Your Financial Game, a number of years ago, by talking about how wealthy people don't think about either or, they tend to think both.
They do, because they realize that we can have both.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's an act of faith, knowing that looking to the future, we don't have to just settle for one or the other. We can have both if we plan properly today. So let's take someone that's in the survival mode right now, that just barely eking out enough to exist.
Mm-hmm.
As George Gilder said, it's more about our emotions than it is about the economy that creates wealth. Believing in yourself and the future enough to start laying aside a portion of everything that you make is the most critical thing that you can do, because those few pennies or dollars or dimes or nickels or quarters or whatever it is that you're setting aside in the survival mode are going to be the seeds that produce wealth in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And those seeds then have to be cultivated, nourished. Uh, you have to know how to take care of them. And the best place to do that is with participating whole life insurance. Because as the SEC and FINRA have said, there's only 4 places that you are guaranteed that your money will not be destroyed if you put it there. And that is certain bank contracts like certificates of deposits or passbook savings accounts, which are paying nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't multiply your resources. You're taxed on what you do gain. Treasuries, which is whether you're buying bills, bonds, or notes, which are not currently producing more than what inflation does.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're not making money in those vehicles. You're actually losing money to inflation. And then there's guaranteed annuities by insurance companies, which typically don't pay you more than inflation either, unless you live longer than what the insurance company thinks you're going to live. Mm-hmm. And finally, there's participating whole life insurance. Those are the only guaranteed places that are going to keep your money. Now, with whole life insurance, we've seen the numbers here. They're growing faster than inflation is. And so it becomes a hedge against deflation, specifically because your dollar that you're paying in is fixed by the age that you purchased the policy. And as time goes on, the dollar that you put in there is worth less than what it was when you started the contract, but the growth is increasing.
Continues. Yeah. So, and obviously the death benefit in life insurance is another tool that that helps combat inflation short term. It's kind of a hedge against inflation, if you will.
It is.
The longer you live, maybe the overall internal rate of return comes down to be somewhat close to inflation, but it's definitely a hedge against inflation. We have to work in the economy, in the monetary system that exists, but this is a way to hedge against it.
And some people say, well, how do you know these contracts are going to be honored in the future? Well, we don't. No more than Jeremiah knew that the deed that he purchased from his cousin was going to be honored 70 years after the exile of the Israelites when they came back to Judah. But we have to believe that the future is going to be better than what we're seeing today in our economy.
Yeah, and this is one of the most guaranteed tools that we have. I don't know of anything else that would accomplish what we could accomplish with this.
And the worst thing that could happen is that contracts aren't honored. Mm-hmm. And then you will be no better off or no worse off than anybody else, because when contractual law is not honored, then it's each man to himself.
It is. But the mindset that you adopt by starting something like this and putting faith in the future, that mindset will stay with you.
That's correct.
If you let it through thick and thin, regardless of what happens, you will be better off with that mindset, and that's one thing you can count on.
That is so true. So today, like we said, this is a faith exercise. It's a faith in believing that you can make this happen, and a faith in the fact that you believe the future can be better than what it is today, not only for yourself, but for future generations. And with that type of faith, whole life insurance becomes a requirement for you to have in your portfolio.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Extremely important. You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. We'll be back here next week.